Jim Rogers may have failed at dictating the school board's chores for a new leader, but he's making waves in the halls of higher education at both ends of the state. Which part of the world does Jim Rogers want to rule next? We'll ask him next on Face to Face. Welcome to Face to Face. I'm Jon Ralston. Well, he wanted more power, and the university regents gave it to him. And now Jim Rogers is spending that capital. Former UNR President John Lilly, who Rogers wanted out, is taking over at Baylor University. And now, after 11 years at the helm, UNLV President Carol Harter plans to give up her post this summer and focus on fundraising. Rogers says he wants to see his vision realized. Was Carol Harter standing in his way? Joining us, the man widely seen as being responsible for Harter's ouster, University Chancellor and local media magnate, Jim Rogers. Welcome back to the program.
Hi, John.
All right, one thing I've always liked about you, and one thing I really enjoy about having you on the show is you're a straight shooter. But you know what? You're dancing around all this. I'm not going to ask you about stuff you can't talk about with Carol Harter and a personnel issue, but just be upfront with people right now. You never liked Carol Harter, you never wanted her at the university, and you've been working for a long time to get her to leave.
Well, leave out that I never liked Carol Harter.
And the rest of it's true.
I do like Carol Harter. And we've had a fairly decent personal relationship. You know, she and Mike and Beverly and I have gone out to dinner on a lot of occasions. But we've had some professional differences. There's been no question about that.
But it goes back a long way, Mr. Rogers. I mean, the bottom line is that you didn't think she was doing a very good job at the university for a variety of different reasons.
Well, I don't want to get into that, John, because now we skirt the personnel issue. And I can't do that.
I'm not asking you why she left. I know that.
You know that.
But I'm not asking why she left. But here's what I don't get. Maybe you can explain this to people, because there's been a lot of criticism out there about what happened here. Let me just read you some things. Carol Harter, 265% increase in doctoral enrollment, 23 new buildings renovated or built, 100 new degrees, 69% new faculty, increase of 22% to 35% in minorities, $556 million in fundraising. Boy, it's a surprise you didn't fire her earlier.
Well, you know, I don't want to go back to the cause and effect of all of those things. And there's no question, Carol's done an awful lot of good things. My gosh, if she hadn't, she would never have survived 11 years. But I think that at some point, John, and you and I have talked about this before, that at some point people in management positions run out of new ideas and run out of energy. And that the growth of the system, the growth of the university itself, I thought really needed a new person to carry it from here to there. And I'm not trying to, wait a second.
Okay.
I'm not trying to take anything at all away from Carol. She's done a good job. She really has. But at some point you need to start with somebody and go forward. Let me finish.
Okay.
Jim Rogers is going to be here 3 or 4 years, because at the end of that period, it's my feeling that I will have either offended so many people or have made so many goofy decisions that it'll be time for me to move on. And that's just the natural evolution of this kind of job.
Again, though, you have been, one thing I will give you credit for, you usually say exactly what's on your mind, whether it's goofy or gets you in trouble. People. Let me make a statement to you, and you just say yes or no to this. You wanted this chancellor's job because you thought that this university system was in trouble. It needed to have some changes. 2 of those changes you thought were needed were the directions of UNR and UNLV, and you wanted to change the presidents out. That's what you thought about doing when you got in there, and now you've accomplished that. It's time to get on with Jim Rogers' vision. True or false?
Well, I don't think it's Jim Rogers' vision, and I don't think it's true or false. I can say this, that a lot of what you say is accurate, all right? I don't want to go through word for word and
but
say...
But that's pretty close, isn't it?
I think it's pretty close, John. I think so.
Let me ask you to respond to a description, because I thought it was a very interesting description. There's been a ton of commentary on what's happened, as you know. A guy named Hugh Jackson, who's a local liberal blogger, wrote about this. Let me show you what he wrote, because I thought it was very interesting. I do think there's an irony here, because here is a guy, he's talking about you, who was really well-intentioned, but through an overbearing arrogance, he has meddled to the point where now the community is beginning to have a palpable backlash against his efforts. You saw with the school district superintendent fiasco, where his meddling, and he clearly was spearheading that, drove off the candidate. I actually don't agree with that, but forget it. Forget about that he himself wanted to see in the job. Now the regents, after a time of really cowering and not saying much of anything one way or another, trembling in Rogers' shadow, now even they are starting to come out and say that he's running roughshod. You know, you've been very open. You know, it's tough to go from a dictatorship to a democracy. Dictatorship referring to TV stations. You know, sometimes dictators, even if they're benevolent dictators, don't do the right thing.
Oh, I would agree with that.
Do you think?
And I will tell you that probably every day I reassess what I'm doing. You know, there was a very critical article, I guess article or editorial of me in this weekend's Review Journal that was signed by 6 of the former Senate faculty chair.
You know, I want to talk about this.
Well,
we have to take a break, and I want you to respond to those, and I want you to talk about what happened with those, and we'll talk about that when we come back. It's Valentine's Day, and we're feeling the love here with Jim Rogers, the Chancellor of the University System.
You're watching Face to Face with Jon Ralston.
Welcome back to the program. It's Valentine's Day, and there hasn't been a lot of love out there recently for Chancellor Jim Rogers, but he came on Face to Face anyhow because he just loves us here on the program. All right, you mentioned this stuff that was in the RJ on Sunday, and there was a lot of it. Let me just read from a little bit of one, and then you can talk about what your reaction was to this. This was the one you referred to, but from the 6 former faculty Senate chairs. We as faculty and experts in our chosen fields reject business tactics that remove our voice from the decision-making process. The ousting of presidents and the naming of potential successors without input from the campus community is inexcusable. It shows an arrogant disregard for the principles of shared governance upon which great universities are built. I got to tell you, I kind of get a kick out of that one just for this reason. My dad was a professor for 30 years, and he used to go after every president and always thought that he should have more say in the decision-making. I mean, they're never going to get any say in the decision-making, are they, Mr. Rogers?
Of course they're going to get a say.
They're going to get a say?
But they're not going to get make the final decision. Now, you want to go through all of those points one by one, because you put it out on one of your, whatever you call it, that I had anointed Morgan as the successor to Carol Harter. I will tell you, and you can call Dick and ask him. I have never once, not once, suggested to Dick Morgan that he become a president of either UNR or UNLV.
But you have publicly said he'd be great at it.
I've said he'd be a good president.
Okay. All right.
You know, that really, this came from a conversation I had with 3 people in northern Nevada who called me to say, you know Dick Morgan very well. Do you think he'd be a pretty good president for UNR? And I said, I think he would. I do. It seems to be that their opinion in this seems to be that if you run it like a business, that therefore you exclude governance by the faculty, and that's simply not so. What I'm trying to do is to get to be more efficient in those areas that I think need efficiency in order to drive more of the money down into the schoolrooms or classrooms for the professors and the students. So I was a little surprised by the document, but here's what I did. I understand, John, better than anybody how hard I push on a lot of things. I've told you that I thought, and I've told the regents this, that I thought that it was going to take a lot of pushing and a lot of butt kicking to get this whole system going as a system, and I pushed very hard. So I'm mindful of the fact that there's a natural resistance out there and there's a natural fear. So let me tell you what I did. On Sunday morning, after Beverly brought me the paper and said, look at this, I called all of the 6 people that were on that list. Now, I only got 3 phone numbers because the other 3, I think, were unlisted.
What, did you call them, intimidate them?
No.
The big bad chancellor's calling
John,
them, don't criticize me anymore in the paper?
You know better than that, because what I did, I called them and I said, I'm concerned about what you've said. I think we ought to talk about it. And yesterday morning, I sent each one of the 6 an email which said, why don't we get together? All 6 of you, let's not do it 1 and 1 and 1 or 3 or something of that sort, at a meeting in your office or my office. And let's talk about every one of these issues. I also said in there that I thought that we ought to invite the media, since they had included the media in the original document that they sent me, that the media ought to be there so that there's, quote, nothing sinister suspected about going on in the back room, and that I would be happy to meet with them at any time in the next 10 days.
You've met with a lot of people. You like meeting with your critics. What's interesting to me, though, and maybe there's a disconnect here between what goes on in your private business life as a TV executive and what goes on in your public life as chancellor. And there was another letter in there from a UNLV professor who addressed some of these things, especially because there's been a lot of talk about whether or not you've criticized Carol Harter's record on diversity. Here's what that professor wrote. How many of the top executives in Sunbelt Communications, that's your company, are women or minorities? I cannot say for sure because the company is privately and closely held. My understanding, though, is that there is one woman and few, if any, minorities. I don't even want you to defend that whether it's true or not, but I want to ask you this question. You know, you can do whatever the hell you want at Channel 3. You're the boss. You're the chancellor of a university system. It's a public organization. Perception does matter. So why in the world, or how in the world are we going to get what you so crave for this university system? What I want and everyone else wants, respect. If it looks like there's a chancellor who controls the Board of Regents, who can do whatever the hell he wants, whenever he wants, who's going to want to come here?
Well, you know, John, I think that was even suggested in the piece that I would run everybody off. But I will tell you this, that there was an article written about a week ago where the professional search firm commented on my style and said that this would be a place where people will be glad to come because there's some stability. There is some stability in how the place operates now. We don't have a Board of Regents that seems to be dysfunctional, do we? We
can argue about that in the next system. In the next segment, we'll argue about that.
But seriously,
okay.
We move forward very carefully and we move forward together. So there is great predictability on what I do. If you look at my management style, I moved over from the TV stations and from everything else I'm involved in very easily because I have structured a group of people that is very competent to operate things. I am not an operator. I don't want to run UNLV and I don't want to run UNR.
Sure seems like it.
No,
sure
it doesn't.
Like it. Yeah,
no,
sure
it doesn't.
Does.
Well, wait a second now. In the short run, though, we're talking about changing structures, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to bring in, that I would want to bring in a president who is a, quote, yes person to Jim Rogers, so that every time that person wants to make a decision, they call up Jim and say,
yeah,
well, I'll tell you, why don't you do this? And the way I would look at it, I would call all of the other 6 presidents if I were you. Start with Richard Carpenter and go through all other 6 presidents, all of whom I think are really superstars, and I know I use that term all the time, and ask them about their relationship with me.
All right, first we got to finish this program before I can make those phone calls.
All right.
And when we come back, I do want to talk about the Board of Regents moving forward. Let's talk about that. He wants to talk about anything but Carol Harter at this point, and I'll let you decide. Is it a dysfunctional group still, or are they just a bunch of people who are Jim Rogers' bosses? You decide when we come back.
1960, John Kennedy is elected president. Bill Mazeroski's 9th inning homer wins a World Series. The Rat Pack invades the Sands Hotel for the first time. And in 1960, the Nevada Development Authority was in its 4th year of assisting businesses to relocate to Las Vegas. I'm Summer Hollingsworth, president of the NBA, and I want to personally invite you to become a member and share in the many benefits of Nevada's premier development organization as we celebrate 50 years of diversifying our Southern Nevada economy.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I'm Jon Ralston. Chancellor Jim Rogers has been in the news a lot lately, and now he's on the place where he makes news, Face to Face. I'm going to wrap up this thing with Carol Harter real quickly. It's really interesting. There's been a lot of things out there about, oh, she alienated donors, and you were upset that she alienated certain people with her style, etc. Well, why is it okay now that she's going to a fundraising position? That seems somewhat ironic to me.
Well, you know, Carol has a very good relationship with an awful lot of donors. And I can tell you that I know that there's certain things in the pipeline that she's been working on for the last 6 months, and it's essential that those be completed, and that she go forward during the rest of the campaign, which I think is another 2 or 3 years, to do those things. So I don't have any problem with that.
So basically, you don't think she can screw anything up too badly in 2 years? Is that what you're saying?
You know, let's not put it that way. No, what I'm saying is I think that she'll be very effective.
Okay. All right. Let's leave it at that. You say something positive about her. All right. Let's talk about the regents. I mean, you're saying, oh, suddenly they're all well behaved. You know, they're listening to what you tell them to do. Maybe I'm misquoting you here, but I'm paraphrasing. You know what? Let me just show you a couple things. Regent Linda Howard actually called in to a KNPR show last week, and here's what she had to say about you. The chancellor does not reach out to me. I don't know if it's because I'm black and I'm a woman. I don't know if he's not getting along with Howard Rosenberg, another regent, because he is Jewish and gay. I don't know what it is. Let me ask you a very simple question. Is she out of her mind?
Well, you know, I don't know that I would say it that way.
Yes, you would.
I would, John, let me say this. I feel very bad about this situation because all of the accusations that she makes, I don't think there's any validity to any of them. But it makes me kind of sad to watch somebody self-destruct. And I think that's what we're seeing. And it's not just with me or with you. It's with an awful lot of people. So.
And this is a person who's overseeing higher education. Well, luckily she's not since you're the boss, but let's go on. Howard Rosenberg also offered his opinion about why he thinks what happened at UNLV happened. Let me show you what he had to say.
Jim's problem with her is very simple. She's strong. She won't take crap from anybody, particularly not him. She knows more than he does about education. That's a given. And she will not back down.
Let me ask you this question. Is it true? Maybe it's just that you and Carol Harter are too much alike. I mean, you're both very strong-willed, stubborn, tough, smart, care about education, and you just butted heads, and she was just too strong for you.
Well, I'm neither a psychiatrist nor a psychologist, so I'm not going to give you an opinion on that because I'm not qualified. And you know, in looking to see what Howard Rosenberg says, I'm sure there's something to all of that. You know, I don't think that was the determining factor. I really don't. But there are a lot of people that are a lot smarter than I am.
Let's talk about going forward then, and you know, you have to have some kind of self-critical ability, Mr. Rogers. Have you looked back on this and said, you know what, there's some things I probably shouldn't have done. Maybe I could have handled this differently. Maybe going forward, some things should change. What about that?
Well, you got to give me some specifics in the area of what?
In the area of trying to get rid of Carol Harter for 4 or 5 years.
Well, I'm not following you now, John. Well, let's talk about.
You say you want to change structures. You said you want to change
right.
structures in the university system.
Exactly.
Seems to a lot of people, really what you want us to do is change 2 people out, Carol Harter and John Lilly. Now we can move forward. And forget, I'm not going to call it Jim Rogers' vision. What is best for the university system to give you the best of it?
Yeah, but the predicate that you always start with is that I ousted those 2 and therefore this is next. And that doesn't follow. The question is, what are we going to do in the future, regardless of what's happened in the past?
Okay.
And I think looking forward, that I believe that we are going to have very, very strong applicants for both presidencies.
Superstars.
Superstars, all right? I've had several phone calls from people around the country. I'm not going to tell you who they are, because I'm not privy to do that, privileged to do that. But I believe that both schools are plum attractions at this point. I really do. And I'm going to tell you, you want me to give you some reasons?
When we come back, we'll have one more segment and you can give me some reasons when we come back. And we'll ask Jim Rogers about the school superintendent search too. Back in a moment with Jim Rogers, the Chancellor of the university system.
You're watching Face to Face with Jon Ralston.
Welcome back to the program. We're talking to Chancellor Jim Rogers today. All right, you wanted to make a point about the future. Go ahead.
We have a great relationship with the present governor. I'm convinced that the system is going to have a very good relationship with the next governor, regardless of which of the 6 that is. We have a good relationship with the legislature, very good relationship. They believe in what we tell them, so I think we're going to have a substantial amount of money from them. We have a very good relationship with the public at large, with the private sector of the public, so that I think we're going to be able to go into that arena and get a lot of money to develop the various things that we're looking at. So for a president to come in and look at that and say, wow, this is the foundation upon which I'm building. Another thing, you're going to have 2 new presidents, and I think that will be an advantage to either one, because neither one will come in and say, oh my gosh, I've got to deal with the fact that this person has been in office for so long. I want them to both understand that they are partners in what they're going to do.
But let me ask you keep saying we, and that's interesting. And I just want to ask you a general philosophical question. A lot of people are asking this question. What is the university system? Is it the Board of Regents who are running it, or is it Jim Rogers? You know, you gave a lot of money to Jill Derby, who's running for Congress. You take these regents on your private jet. You take them on fishing trips. These are devil's advocate here. You've hopelessly compromised this board. They will do whatever you tell them to do. You're a powerful media mogul, have all this money. You've essentially silenced them. There's no dissent anymore against Jim Rogers except for one wacko regent and one who is willing to once in a while criticize you. There's no we. There's you.
No, John, that's not right, because you don't know how often I talk to them, which is, I don't know whether I get to all 13 of them every week, but I talk to all of them, or all of them, I think, in a week period.
Give them their marching orders?
But here, no, I don't. But here's the problem that I've got. If they were all over me all of the time, you would say they're micromanaging. They hired the guy to run the place, and now they won't let him. On the other side, if they hire me to run the place as the chief executive officer, they are a board, I'm the chief executive officer, then when they're not telling me, you know, what color toilet paper I should pick for the various schools, you're out there telling me.
So you're saying it's a damned if you do and damned.
Of course it is.
And you know what, the same thing came up. It's interesting because that's essentially what you said about the school superintendent search that you were involved in. Let me show you what you told Christina Littlefield. It was an interesting quote. You said, you have two choices. If you do nothing, nothing gets done. If you do anything, you get criticized for invading somebody else's territory. Between the two, I'd rather take the criticism. And you know what? To your credit, you really don't care about the criticism. I mean, you have taken a lot, and you keep on going. What about the superintendents? Because you are just as interested, I think, in lower education in this state as you are in higher education, and you have been one of the few people willing to make the linkage on the importance between the two. The Nadelstern thing was really botched, wasn't it?
Oh boy, that's a tough question.
No, it's an easy question.
You know, I don't know whether it was botched, because I really wasn't, and I know you won't believe me, but I really wasn't involved in the day-to-day operation.
I do believe that. As I said, I think Hugh Jackson's wrong. I don't think you're the one who should take the blame for that. But to some extent, it was the heavy-handed behavior, I think, that was seen by some of the school board members. Sometimes if you're too heavy-handed, even if your goals are well-intentioned, you're going to push people in the other direction, Mr.
Well,
Rogers.
you know something, John, I'll tell you. I hear what you're saying, but I think that a couple of those trustees had made up their mind, and it was, let me pick the excuse for justifying it. So if the group had not pushed it as hard as they did, there would have been well, you know, this Nadelstern maybe isn't the hot dog. Maybe these people really aren't that interested in him. Maybe they're not really out there pushing for him. If you push the other way, they say, well, you know, they pushed too hard, they offended us all. The truth of the matter is that who gets offended or who doesn't get offended is really irrelevant. The question is, what are you doing for the school system? Not for my power system or for the regent's power system or for the school board's power system. Nobody ever sits around and talks about the kids and the teachers. Nobody. I told you I was in my job 10 months before the word student or professor ever entered the discussion. And that's very distressing to me. So I realized that I offend a lot of people, and you know, what Howard said, and I listened to what Howard said because there is something that's substantial and accurate in what he says. It's just that in the way that I balance things going forward, I have to say, given what he says and given what's out there, this is my choice of how to go forward.
So do you think it's going to change? I mean, is anything going to change going forward, do you think? I mean, is the relation between you and the regents going to change?
Well, I think it's a pretty good relationship. I mean, I talk with Brett Whipple all the time. I talk with all of them all the time. I bet I talk to Thalia Dondero 5 times a week about this.
I hope that you'll continue to have a willingness to come on this program and talk about it.
Oh, I'm always
anytime.
Delighted to be here.
Just
anytime.
Saying, anytime. That's what I want to hear. Jim
anytime
Rogers.
You ask, I'm here.
All right, and that is true. Chancellor, thanks for coming on the program.
Glad to be here.
All right. And the next face-to-face, so far 3 Republicans want to be Nevada's next governor. So why is only State Senator Bob Beers willing to debate on face-to-face? Where are Jim Gibbons and Lorraine Hunt? We wish we knew. But we'll hear from Beers on the next face-to-face.